Yeah. Now, so in the previous session, we have discussed the access modifiers. What are the access modifiers and what are the keywords we are using as access modifiers, and what are the different levels of visibility that we get with these different access modifiers. Uh, what is public, what is default, what is protected and private, all these modifiers we have understood in previous session. Now let us discuss about constructors. So what are constructors? By the name itself, we can understand constructors are used to construct. Hmm? What we gonna construct? These are used to construct what? Objects. Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, here the structures are nothing but objects here. Hmm? Objects of our classes. Hmm? At a very basic level, in plain English, we can say to construct the objects, we use constructors. Okay. Next, technically what we can say, a constructor is a special method of a class that has the name as same as the class name. So constructor name will be similar to class name. Of course, the same name we do use for the constructor, and constructor basically what we can say, it is a method. Constructor is also a method. Hmm? So basically constructor is a method, but the name for this constructor will be always the class name. Is it clear, guys? This point which you need to remember about constructor. Is it clear? Yeah, guys, tell me. Now, yeah. Next, the other point we need to remember about constructor is a constructor never has any return type. No return type. That means not even void. Whenever we are saying we are writing a method in our programs, what is the standard structure of the method? There should be some return type to the method, right? At least void we need to have. Without return type, we cannot have any method. But in case of constructor, when we are writing constructor, it is compulsory that should not have any return type. Even void also should not be. Even if you, whenever we don't want to return any result from a method, then what do we do? Usually we declare that method as void method. But in case of constructor, not even void should be used as the return type for the method. Is it clear, guys? This constructor method, we should not have even void as the return type. Is it clear? The important points which you need to remember always. And a constructor can have 0 or more parameters. A constructor can have no parameters or one parameter or two parameter or 10 parameters. Any number of parameters can be there for a constructor. So all these are the basic points that we need to remember about a constructor. Is it clear, guys? Yeah. 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 Now the different types of constructors. Let us say different types of constructors. So what are the different types of constructors that do we have? We have four types of constructors that we can say: default constructor, uh, in other words we can say no arguments constructor. In other words, you can say no arguments constructor. Next, overloaded constructor means when overloaded construct. Okay. Second, we can say parameterized constructor. Parameterized constructor. That means there can be one or more constructors, means parameters, and then overloaded constructor. Overloaded constructor means what? If we have more than one constructor with different number of parameters, then we can say it is overloaded constructor. Then we say it as overloaded constructor. But about overloading in detail, we will be discussing in later sessions in polymorphism. But as of now, you remember that overloaded constructor means same multiple constructors with different number of parameters that are overloaded constructors. Next, copy constructor. Copy constructor. So copy constructor means which is used to copy one object values into newly being created object, or to create a duplicate copy of an existing copy, existing object. Then we can make use of copy constructor. We can make use of copy constructor. So these are the four different types of constructors that we have. Now let us see one by one all these constructors. Just give me 2 minutes, guys. I will be back. Okay, guys, I'm back. So now let us see one by one of these constructors. So first one is default constructor. So what is default constructor? You can say by name itself we can understand this constructor will come by default for every class, whether you write or not, whether you define or not this constructor in your class. This constructor will be applied and will be available, made available to all your classes to create the objects of your classes. So how we can say about this is like default constructor is made available with every class, even though we have not defined any constructor in our class, in our classes. A default constructor does not have any parameters. So if we have defined our own constructor in the class, then it will be used to create objects, otherwise create objects, otherwise JVM will provide a default constructor during runtime to create objects of our classes, objects of our classes. So this is about the default constructor. This is about default constructor. And the constructor, and even what else we can say about a constructor? A constructor is used to create and initialize objects, initialize objects, and a constructor and a constructor is called or invoked only once and in an object's lifetime. 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 Whereas normal methods or normal methods can be invoked any number of times once object has been created. Once an object has been created. But a constructor is called or invoked only once in an object's lifetime while creating the object. While creating the object. But whereas the normal methods can be invoked any number of times once object has been created or after object has been created. After object has been created. All these points, whatever I am noting down here, are very important points which you need to remember, guys. So what is constructor? What does a constructor means? So we need to understand and remember all these points and different types of constructors. Default constructor, parameterized constructor, overloaded constructor, and copy constructor. Hmm. Now, what is default constructor? Default constructor comes by default with every class, even though we are not defining our own constructor in our classes. But if we define a constructor by ourselves, then that constructor will be used. But how should that default constructor should be defined? With no arguments. Default constructor, in other words, we can say no arguments constructor also, and the default constructor does not have any parameters anytime. No parameters will be there. Such constructor only we call as default constructor or no arguments constructor. Is it clear, guys? So now, example, sorry, syntax, how we can write? Syntax, we can write about constructor like this. Syntax, always make the methods as public, right? So constructor is also method, so we can make it as public. Of course, you can give like others also, like default for a private and protected also, but always it is recommended to keep your constructor as public constructor with public visibility. So public, and constructor name should be same as the class name. So class name and like this, and within the block of the constructor, see class name, method name is what? Class name. Generally method names start with small letters, right? Like this we need to write. But when we are writing the constructor, it should be copy pasted from class name. So class name, how do we write? Starting letters of every word in the class name is uppercase, right? Capital letter. So like this, and open parenthesis and close parenthesis. So no parameters. Default constructor does not have any parameters at any type. And when we are defining the constructor, there should not be any return type, not even void. Generally, when we are writing methods, how do we write? Void or int, like that we are writing, right? Void set details, void show details, int addition, like that we may write. But in case of constructor, we don't write any return type for the method. Like this we should write. And inside the constructor, what do we write? We write all the object initialization code. Object initialization code. Object initialization code we do write. We write object initialization code. Okay. And example, how we can write public class person. Person is the example class that we are writing regularly, right? So in the person, what do we have? Private string name, private int age, private char gender. In this, what we need to have? We need to have. Generally, we are having public void set person details, right? So here, string n int a char g for gender and assign that data to the member variables. Name equals to n, age equals to a gender equals to g. Like this we write. And in the similar way, what is the other method that we have? Public void show person details, and we write sysout statements for displaying the person data like this. This is a normal methods how we write public void, public int, long, like that. But when we are defining the constructor, how do we write? We write always constructor should be public. Why? Because it is also a method, and constructor name same as the class name. So you can copy and paste the constructor class name as constructor name, and then inside this we can write some initialization code. What we can write some initial at the time of object creation, initially what should be done. That initialization code we can give. So what we can give, some statements, system.out.println person object has been created. Person object has been created and initialized also. So to initialize it, you can write name equals to some empty string. Otherwise, null will be there, right? So initialize it with some default initial value as per your application. Empty string and age equals to like -1 instead of 0, and gender equals to empty character. Like this we can initialize uh, a person object. Person object has been created and initialized. Like this, any logic you can write, but the logic purpose is what? To initialize the object member variables with some default values. Initialization code, object initialization code we write in constructor. Is it clear, guys? What type of code do we write in constructors? It is object initialization code, not the object, not the uh, business logic code or calculations. Business logic code or calculations, such kind of code we don't write in a constructor. In constructor, always what do we need to write? Object initialization code we have to write. Object initialization means what? Giving some default values to the uh, data members of object or class, and creating some database connections initially only once at a time, kind of things. But in simple words, you can remember this example. Object initialization code, we write inside a constructor. We do write object initialization code in constructor. Is it clear, guys? Next, we see a simple example on constructor. How do we write a constructor and how do we use constructor? Let's create a class person, and we need to let us create separate folder person.java. Now in person.java, actually what we require, same, let us take the same code and constructor we can write like this. Public person name equals to empty string, age equals to -1, and gender equals to empty character. Empty character. So like this. And if you want to give some message, you can give system.out.println person object has been created and initialized. Like this, we can give some initialization logic, which should be executed only once at the time of object creation. Such code we can write like this inside constructor. Now what we need to do, we need to create a main class which is making use of this person class and this person class constructor. Hmm? So let's write public. Hereafter, all the classes will be public. Public class constructors demo. Constructors demo. Inside this, public static void main string args. This here what we do, if I want to use person class, what I should do, I need to create an object for this, right? So how to do that? Person p or person P1 equals to new person. Like this, I'm creating the object, right? So if you observe here so far, how you are using that this is now, if you observe this, you can see this. This is nothing but our constructor only, right? Person class constructor. The same thing here you are using. So whenever if you observe this code, so far in previous examples on in previous concepts when we are discussing, we have never defined any constructor like this. How we have done here in this today's class, but still how it was executing without any compilation errors and runtime errors, this statement, because JVM is creating a default constructor if we are not giving any user defined constructor with no parameters. That's why we are saying it as default constructor. That's why we are calling it as default constructor. So now this constructor we can use any number of times, but for one object only one time. P1 equals to new person, P2 equals to new person. But on the same object, again you cannot call. That means what? P1 dot person, like this you cannot do. On the same object you are not able to call, but the but the other methods, normal methods, show person details. How many times you can call? You can call once object has been created, you can call any number of times. Show person details, can call any number of times the show person details. So in this way, we are creating a constructor and we are making use of constructor. Hmm? And when we are not supplying any parameters, so we can say this, when we are not supplying any arguments, then we can say this constructor as no arguments constructor. And this no arguments constructor will be made available even though you are not writing your own constructor definition in the class. But how will it come? JVM will provide it for you during the runtime. So in this way we create a constructor. In this way we create constructor. Now let us compile and run the application. So let us go to in parent directory constructors. Now Java C constructors demo dot Java. So to for errors, what are the errors? This empty character literal, it is not allowing empty character literal. So let us give like some space here. So it has been compiled. Now how to run Java constructor? Could not make. Could not find the main class. Why? We have written the main class, right? Public static void main. Why still it is saying could not find? Because what is missing? The square brackets. The ARGS always should be an array. So if you write the method signature exactly the same, public static void main string array ARGS, then only it will be treated as the main class and it will be recognized as the main class and it will be used by your Java runtime. Otherwise, it does not use it. Is it clear, guys? What was the error and how we have fixed it? So when we have done any small change in the Java code, we have to compile it. So compile it. So it's compiled right now. Now run the application. Java constructor demo. Oh, still. I think it's not saved, I think. Compile it. Constructors. Okay. We do one thing. What is this strange behavior? Okay, it is not saved. That is the problem. We have written string array, but it has not been saved. That was the problem. We have done the change, but not saved. So we compile it. Now run it. Still. Okay, let's write public class constructor demo. Constructor demo dot Java. Now inside this, create main method public static void main string args. Now here person p1 equals to new person p2 equals to new person. New person. Then p1 dot p1 dot show person details and p1 dot p2 dot show person details. And of course it is a normal method. You can call this any number of times. p1 dot show person details, again p1 dot show person details, like that any number of times you can call. But this one, new person with p1, you cannot duplicate this statement. Only once if you write, that is done. Yeah, you cannot use the same statement p1 equals to new person, like that you cannot use. Now compile it. Constructor demo. Instead of constructors demo, let's compile constructor demo. Person, spelling mistake, capital P. Okay. So compile it. constructor demo. Now Java constructor demo. Like this. See, empty string name, age -1, gender blank string, like this. And every time object has been created and initialized, like this we get or not. So this is the way how we can define a constructor with no parameters, and we can call this constructor. So far in previous programs also similar main class we have written, but how does JVM is dealing with this new person? Because if you don't create any constructor in your person class, JVM will create it for you and it will use it. Hmm? So that's why we are calling this as default constructor. In this way, the default constructor works and we use this default constructor. Is it clear, guys? Yeah, guys, default constructor, is it clear?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, guys, we pause here and shall we continue tomorrow also?
Yeah.
So in between we missed several classes. No? Yeah. Tomorrow also we have class on the same time. Okay. Tomorrow also 7 a.m. IST. Okay, guys. Don't miss class tomorrow. We'll continue with constructors. Bye, guys.